Phase 1. Set a new installment of a beloved cash cow franchise into development. Phase 2. Make it creatively low quality. Phase 3. Infuse it with overly indulgent performative identity politics. Phase 4. Rely on a sympathetic pop culture media to build a narrative ignoring the frustrated disinterest of the broad generality and deflect by calling out a small minority of genuinely offensive streams and posts. Phase 5. Center the pushback around an individual with an emotional button-pushing narrative involving the individual struggling with a bigoted backlash. Phase 6. The low-quality, corporatized blandness of the content and lackluster ratings will be backgrounded amid the culture war battle. Phase 7. The whole project founders and fades in a desultory, nasty, unresolved way. Phase 1. Set a new installment of a beloved cash cow franchise into development. Phase 2. Make it creatively low quality. Phase 3. Infuse it with overly indulgent performative identity politics. Phase 4. Rely on a sympathetic pop culture media to build a narrative ignoring the frustrated disinterest of the broad generality and deflect by calling out a small minority of genuinely offensive streams and posts. Phase 5. Center the pushback around an individual with an emotional button-pushing narrative involving the individual struggling with a bigoted backlash. Phase 6. The low-quality, corporatized blandness of the content and lackluster ratings will be backgrounded amid the culture war battle. Phase 7. The whole project founders and fades in a desultory, nasty, unresolved way. Phase 1. Set a new installment of a beloved cash cow franchise into development. Phase 2. Make it creatively low quality. Phase 3. Infuse it with overly indulgent performative identity politics. Phase 4. Rely on a sympathetic pop culture media to build a narrative ignoring the frustrated disinterest of the broad generality and deflect by calling out a small minority of genuinely offensive streams and posts. Phase 5. Center the pushback around an individual with an emotional button-pushing narrative involving the individual struggling with a bigoted backlash. Phase 6. The low-quality, corporatized blandness of the content and lackluster ratings will be backgrounded amid the culture war battle. Phase 7. The whole project founders and fades in a desultory, nasty, unresolved way. By now, you might have been subjected to the musical stylings of Amandla Stenberg, her Yaz Queen hip-hop and R&B riposte to the online haters and bigots, the set of the video evoking underprivileged, hardscrabble urban strife and struggle, an environment perhaps faintly visible through the ornamental telescope on the fourth-floor balcony of her parents' opulent mansion. How flaky do you have to be, as someone impressed by this, to allow for the idea that an exhibition of empowerment, sassy pushback, and reclaiming the narrative somehow, in and of itself, makes the content something of quality, or that the attitude and statement of the thing doesn't have to bear any particular relation to the quality of the thing? It's affirming, therefore it's inherently good. Amandla Stenberg's singing is just breathy mumbling, which isn't quality, which doesn't rhyme with much quality, with a backing track that is generic and not of great quality, with a music video that isn't of much quality, and dancing that isn't of much quality. If you think it is of quality, or that the creative quality is kind of by the by, or think the attitude itself, of sticking it to the haters or being stunning and brave, is the whole point, or more or less the whole point, then you're not a serious person, you're kind of a lightweight. It's the quality, idiot. The people sick to death of your content and dissing it online aren't motivated by any configuration of ist and phobe hang-ups. It's the lack of quality, of storytelling and characterization. If the quality of your writing, production, directing, and acting was decent and you reined in your more self-indulgent impulses, the vast majority of reasonable people wouldn't give a flying or levitating fuck about the identities of the characters or your identity. The issue isn't really identity, it's what I call ergo identity. I'm the showrunner of the series or show, and I'm lesbian. Ergo, I will infuse it with lesbians, lesbianism, lesbian socio-cultural themes, and scissor-sistering. I'm in charge of Doctor Who, and I'm gay. Ergo, I will infuse it with gayishness, gaydom, gay kisses, and gay identity. It doesn't work if, at the front end of your career, you want opportunities and to be involved in shows, and your identity to not be an impediment to that, and then, once you're established, making the shows you're involved with about your identity. If you contend that we're primed to hate a show like The Acolyte before it's already aired, the response is we've been burned too many times and have come to trust our instincts. If we laugh at dumb stuff like Fire in Space or Burning Stone Walls, you say it's just a fantasy show and ought not to be taken that seriously. But then, if we question lapses in lore and canon, you will scrupulously and pedantically take it seriously and look for contrived loopholes. Disney Star Wars fans who like to lament by saying it's not all that big a deal and just a fantasy show are also using forums to become self-ordained arbiters of who are real Star Wars fans. Now, if you dissent from appreciating Disney Star Wars slop, you're a fan in quotes. The idea that they have some sort of power of adjudication or can excommunicate someone like it's a religious order is one of the worst exemplars of their anal retentiveness. The lines have got a little blurred, so for you visual learners, I've put together a little illustration to get across an idea about how these skirmishes play out. Basically, there are 3 tiers. Masses of everyday people with fulfilling lives who check out Disney Star Wars content and switch off pretty quick because it seems lame and dull to them. At the other extreme are a tiny hardcore, real nasty pieces of work who send actors and fans vicious comments devoid of empathy, civility, and often even rationality. There's also a group in the middle, which has nothing to do with that minuscule group of miscreants and is more aligned with the big mainstream group. Me and the usual YouTubers you likely know of. A group that fancies itself a bit in the know about pop culture, whether that's a good or a bad thing I'll leave up to your judgment, and who want to express ideas about intellectual properties and source material that matters to them, formatively and aesthetically, and who, to put it mildly, haven't been exactly over the moon about the state of things, and collaborate and mingle out of a shared sense of incredulity and general fucked-offness about cultural touchstones in their life getting shat over from a great height by a bunch of sanctimonious and talentless twats. Thing is, many of those sanctimonious showrunners, abetted by flaky and relentless commenters online and editorialists at Deadline, etc., decide that, if you're in that middle group, discreet from any bigots, homophobes, racists, or other ists and phobes, in fact having an intellectual aversion to such extremists, you more or less might as well basically can be lumped in together. Or if you show sufficient signs of being against the Acolyte or Amandla's musical efforts, then, well, it's only really a hop, a skip, and a jump to deciding you can be consigned to that other crate of incelish dinkuses, written off as probably or likely a bigot, and if you are strident in your dislike of the content, then, well, the likelihood, the vibe is you're part of a toxic fandom, so bish bash bosh, bibbity bob, take the mental path of least resistance, and, well, just assume bigotry as the root cause of the criticism. Chuck in a bit of ad hominem attack for good measure, and case closed, brush your hands, done and dusted. No sense in expending any further negative mental energy in engaging with such reactionary hopeless cases. Back to the coalface of extolling soulless corporatized crap. If you think and act like that, conflating people who shouldn't be conflated, and are unable or unwilling to distinguish between 2 clear-cut categories, then you're being a smarmy little douche, without enough mental acumen to distinguish the right way round to sit on a toilet seat, let alone contribute meaningfully to the discourse. How easy and tempting it must be then for showrunners and actors, on the defensive in the face of critical disdain and terrible ratings, to make use of this abstract and malleable toxic fandom. Speaking with The Hollywood Reporter, Leslie Headland stated, "Honestly, I feel sad that people would think that if something were gay, that would be bad." She added, "It makes me feel sad that a bunch of people on the internet would somehow dismantle what I consider to be the most important piece of art that I've ever made." There's a lot of frankly astounding presumption in this. The idea that people aren't enlightened enough to be able to distinguish between high art and compelling mainstream entertainment penned, sung, performed, orchestrated, or acted by gay people on the one hand, and the aforementioned ergo-gayness of modern Hollywood narcissists who co-opt existing properties as a means of identity show and tell. See again the lazy and aggravating conflation, the absurd reductionism? And the idea that a bunch of people on the internet not only would have the capability and wherewithal to dismantle her work, but would relish successfully pulling off such a venture, and lastly, the idea that the Acolyte would be the most important work of art she has ever made, when it is neither art nor in any way actually important. Honestly, how do these people manage to walk around with such gigantic sticks up their asses? Disney today is like a bunch of teenage musicians given responsibility for the New York Philharmonic. The practice suites are well appointed, the resources and funding lavish, the instruments perfectly fashioned for virtuosos, the recital hall superlative, and none of them can make anything worth shit out of all of it, and they come up with a repertoire of an out-of-tune Greensleeves and 3 blind mice. The severe decline of Disney at such a hurtling pace is one of the most extraordinary cultural narratives of our lifetimes. In its abeyance to identity, Disney has lost its own.